Hello, dear colleagues from around the world. My name is Yunfei Zhao. I am a reporter from China Global Television Network, or CGTN. It's my great honor to be here with you. And today I'm going to share some of my stories while reporting in Wuhan. The epicenter used to be of the coronavirus outbreak. I was dispatched to Wuhan earlier in January 2020 and stayed there for more than 100 days, roughly 120 days in Wuhan. So back then, people have no idea how dangerous this virus was. And for me as a reporter, it was certainly a breaking news reporting, and it could be a reporting in some dangerous situations. Also, Wuhan is the city that got shut down for 76 days to contain the virus. It's a very brave decision by the Chinese authorities, and it's perhaps one of the cities that endured the longest shutdown throughout the world. But it was still at the early stage of the pandemic, and that shutdown was very effective. But for me as a reporter, I have no idea while I was in Wuhan how long this shutdown would last and how dangerous the virus was and how much it could affect the society as well as the world in terms of economy, in terms of other perspectives in people's daily life. So it was a very unique experience in Wuhan while the city was under lockdown. I would like to share some of my stories while reporting, as well as share some of my insights on my reporting. So just a little bit background of myself. I joined CGTN in 2017. I cover multiple fields of news, including politics, including culture, including social issues. And I was dispatched to Central China's Zhengzhou Bureau in early 2019. And by the way, Wuhan was also part of Central China. So that's why when there's something happening in Wuhan, I have to go to that city and figure out what has happened. So once again, at the beginning point, coronavirus is all about breaking news. And before I came to CGTN, I got a master's degree at Northwestern University. At the university, I get a chance to work for U.S. media. A lot of my work as a student journalist got published on Al Jazeera, USA Today, and many other mainstream media platforms in the U.S. I also have a bachelor's degree of communication and University of Washington. And I hope that this conversation could be conducted through live, but due to the time differences, we have to pre-record it. Also, obviously, due to the virus, we won't be able to meet each other in person. But do communicate with me if you have any questions, or if you want to make any comments about my speech over here. So I'm available on Facebook. I have a public page called Reporter Zhao Yunfei. And also please follow me on Twitter at Yunfei_ZH. And also please do shoot me an email at zhao.yunfei@cgtn.com. Okay, I want to start up with a clip which is ABC, the American U.S. organization. And they reported a story about myself as a reporter working in the front line.
And it is a global epidemic, killing thousands of people, shocking international economies, and instilling panic across 6 continents and dozens of countries.
But the coronavirus originated in one Chinese city, now on lockdown. ABC 7's Kate Beery has an exclusive interview with a journalist from inside Wuhan.
So before we enter the intensive care unit, we have to wear on some medical isolation units. So here we go.
This is disease that really has a high infectivity. It's very dangerous.
COVID-19, the disease caused by the novel coronavirus, was completely unknown to the world in January.
We would like to first of all tell the facts to our general public, to the international audience.
Yet Yunfei Zhao, a reporter for the China Global Television Network, didn't think twice, rushing into a region that thousands were desperate to flee.
Once there's a breaking news, I have to come because this is a huge news for the world. So I have to be here and bring maybe accurate and balanced reporting to the global audience.
Zhao and I met in 2016 when we were both student journalists reporting in Washington, D.C. Eventually, he returned to China. Can you talk about why you went to Wuhan?
I've been a field reporter around the central China. So basically, Wuhan, it's part of my beat. So I have to be here once anything happens.
Do you have the virus? Are you getting tested for the virus?
My colleague, we're all good. So none of my colleagues got infected.
Military freight planes from People's Liberation Army have arrived here at Wuhan Tianhe International Airport.
Wuhan, the center of China's high-speed railway network, has been on lockdown since January 23rd.
You can travel in, but you cannot travel out.
What effect does this have on the workforce?
Well, especially the small and medium enterprises in China, this is definitely a huge hit for them. They suffer from a huge economic strike. Also, the Central Bank of China has kind of offered a mortgage for small and medium enterprises. And also for those students who are about to graduate from college, this year is going to be very hard for them. First of all, it doesn't have a lot of job opportunities. And second, they can't go out to look for a job. They can't go to job fairs.
Zhao told me China hasn't seen anything like this since the SARS epidemic 17 years ago, but that China has learned from it.
The measurements taken by the local government is unprecedented. It got contained much faster than people expected.
We're in El Paso, Las Cruces, the southwestern United States, New Mexico and Texas. From reporting at the epicenter of the outbreak, what can you tell our viewers about the virus in terms of being prepared?
So when you got any symptoms, do go see a doctor and get cured as soon as possible, and you're good. Speaking of prevention, take necessary precaution measures. For example, avoid going to crowded places, wash your hands thoroughly. It's just basically strategies that can prevent any kind of infection disease.
For now, Zhao and his team remain trapped in the city now infamous as the first host of the deadly virus, looking forward to covering the end of the epidemic.
We really hope that to see people's smiling faces after the epidemic and do some after reporting, and then we head back.
赵云飞 CCTN Wuhan, Hubei Province.
A journalist determined to spread information about a virus the world knows so little about. Kate Beery, ABC 7.
And if you'd like to learn more, we have a condensed version of the interview with Yunfei in this story on KVIA.com.
And that was a very long reporting on US TV, I would say, because that's a piece of very important news because there are very few reporters was actually in Wuhan, the used to be epicenter of the coronavirus outbreak. So me was a very important source for APC reporters, and that's why they did a very long story about myself. I first arrived in Wuhan on January 11th. And that was the second day of China's Spring Festival travel rush. Now, here's a little background of it, is that every Spring Lunar New Year, people would travel back home to celebrate the New Year, and that's the highest, the peak of China's traffic every January or February. It depends on the lunar calendar. And that can also put a very big threat because there are more human-to-human contact. It could help spread the virus. And also the same time, the virus got found out in Wuhan at that period of time. Wuhan in central China is also the center of China's high-speed railway network, so which is making it even more dangerous. On the first and second day of this Spring Festival travel rush, we closely monitor the pandemic. Well, back then it was the epidemic situation in Wuhan, and I arrived in Wuhan on January 11th and keep watching the situation there. But back then I have very limited information about the virus because so does the government, so does the Health Commission. They have not too much to offer. So a lot of my information of the live shots in Wuhan, it's a lot of the background to the international audience. Many of the content of my live shots are really related to the underground observations. For example, I talk to people on the street, I talk to shop vendors. Many people on the street would say that they are never afraid of the virus because Wuhan is the has many universities. They have very advanced medical systems, so they're never afraid of the virus. A lot of people would comment on that, and they have the confidence that the government will be able to contain the virus. So at the early stage of the pandemic, a lot of people expressed their confidence in containing the virus, and they actually didn't estimate that the virus was too dangerous. And also, I spoke with vendors, because a lot of the restaurants, they plan to open throughout the Lunar New Year to get to earn more money, but due to the methods to contain the virus, a lot of them have to close their stores because there are fewer and fewer people hop onto the street. So it definitely would affect them. Also, at the drugstores, masks were very limited, and those are all the contents I could provide during the live shots. But other than that, in terms of the cases, in terms of how dangerous it could be, it's still a fact-checking process. So there's not too much to offer. But certainly the international world pay close attention to that. So I would like to give more information about Wuhan. As I mentioned, Wuhan was the center of China's high-speed railway network. I have to give the importance of why is it important to contain the virus in Wuhan. So when there is a lack of information, the basic background knowledge of the city would certainly be something that we would like to offer to the general public. And the city got officially locked down on January the 23rd. It was a very surprise mood. It's basically a decision overnight. And I got a news from around 2 a.m. by pushing notification on my cell phone. And so January 23rd was a very, very busy day for all of us. I went to the Wuhan's Hankou railway station to report on the last minute and how the city experienced this lockdown, because technically they set the lockdown time as 10 a.m. So, which gives a lot of difficulties for local, for some of the travelers in the highway system, because Wuhan is a transfer station. So a lot of people travel to Wuhan, but their next train, because it's past 10 a.m., got suspended. So a lot of people got stranded in Wuhan, and what to do with them. We also had a story focused on their situations. So January 23rd, it was a big day that could be memorized by a lot of the people in Wuhan. Then what happened next? I went to an intensive care unit in the hospital and a ICU just for COVID-19 patients. The day I went there was exactly the New Year's Eve on the lunar calendar. Take a watch. It's the Lunar New Year's Eve, but there's not much a festive atmosphere here in this hospital, except nurse on duty Wang Jie bringing dumplings for the patients. This patient's daughter is worried, and Wang Jie has to calm her down. It's part of Wang's job as a professional to give patients hope. But for Wang, she is also concerned about her husband, a doctor who works in the same hospital. When talking about their child, Wang gets emotional.
给我来说的话，大家都挺努力的。对孩子来说，我也觉得亏欠挺多的。我老公可能比我更乐观，因为每次我基本上跟他在一个医院，但是基本也没怎么见面。
Wang's husband Hu Ming is the director of the intensive care unit. He has been working non-stop with the new type pneumonia patients for a month. The frontline mission has let him only rest for 3 hours a day.
熟手太少了，就经验丰富的一线大夫少了。大部分支援的大夫他还不是完完全全的这个 ICU 的大夫，所以培训呐、训练呐，他还需要一个过程。
As Dr. Hu enters the ward, he disappears among his colleagues, who are working tirelessly in bulky and heavy white suits. Tonight, Wang came to Hu's office. They want to call their 9-year-old boy to say Happy New Year.
那爸爸妈妈今天晚上都上夜班，不能陪你了啊。
他新年快乐，儿子。
就祝你新年快乐啦！
新年快乐！
那么
新年快乐！
拜拜。
A special family gathering at a special night. Lunar New Year Eve is a very important day for the Chinese as they reunite with family members. Many medical staff has given up their treasured time with loved ones, and many told me that they are confident to win the battle against the coronavirus. 赵云飞 CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province. And that's the family story. It's a great feature story. It's also a breaking news story, whatever you want to call it, because at the early stage of the pandemic, people would really love to know what really happened in the hospitals. So getting into the core area, getting into the most intensive working zone is very crucial. And we got very exclusive access to a hospital and then get a chance to check out its medical workers' story. And then one thing that really impressed me most is the brave or the professionalism of medical workers, because they even didn't know how the virus would affect their daily working routine and how dangerous the virus was. Because a lot of people back then would compare with COVID-19 to SARS outbreak in China in 2003, that is severe acute respiratory symptoms. And that's also a very big epidemic in China and also in Asia. And also, compare with that, the virus, COVID-19 has more infection rate, but they have a lower mortality rate. So, but what's really the reason behind that and how people can contain the virus? Is there anything we could do to not getting infected? And people have very, very limited knowledge of that. So the footage really went viral when we went to the ICU, because that's perhaps the earliest footage you could find about COVID-19 in an intensive care unit about coronavirus throughout the world. That's the earliest footage you could find. So it not only went viral in China, it also went viral on many international media outlets. So the second day when we woke up, we can see, media around the world are using this footage provided by CGTN and again, because it's certainly that is from intensive care unit, and you can see the pictures of how medical workers cure patients. Now, to get those footage is not an easy task. One of the basic moral issues we were facing is whether to wear those protective suits. Well, given the fact that protective suits are very limited back then, there's a really big scarcity in PPE, given the fact that was January 24th, the Lunar New Year's Eve. So if we go into the ICU, we have to wear a different layer. We have to wear another set of of PPE to protect our safety. But that also means that you can take away someone else's PPE because it's so limited. So there are a lot of discussion between my cameraman and I, and also the medical workers, in terms of how much layers we should wear, because certainly we would not operate. We didn't give injections to the patients. We didn't, stay close to the patients. So we didn't fully gear up compared with the nurses and doctors. Well, if you stand on this point, that was not a usual operation, but back then, that's the safest operation. But certainly, it's something that worth discussing, especially when at the beginning point of the breaking news, any disaster happened, what the reporters should do to not interrupt the normal operation of the professional staff. At the same time, provide the information to the general audience. That's something that really deserves more discussion. Okay, I'm going to show you another clip about Huoshenshan Hospital, because the Chinese government decided to build a temporary hospital to include more patients in them, and that requires more ambitious and bigger job. Let's take a look. This could be one of the busiest construction sites in the world. Hundreds of machines working at a time. Their common goal to build a new hospital to combat the novel coronavirus. Veteran engineer Wu Zhizhen is always on site and always on the phone. To speed up the construction, he stays alert.
捐赠我们这个整个设计的这个 PE 的抗生膜，它的材料就是说库存还比较多，但是我们现在车有点紧张了，我们可能如果是按照正常的速度，可能我们明天把它能够拉到这个地方，但是我们的想法是，今天我们要提前，因为我们所有的实验都要往前移了。
The material that Wu mentioned is used to prevent leakage of polluted water and virus into the land. The site is next to some residential buildings, and the construction plan has to ensure their safety.
对那个技术上的没有任何的难点，只是现在时间特别紧迫，没有充足的采购材料和采购其他的一些设备的一些时间，这给我们的时间是很少。
Not only short in time, but also short in staff. Zhou Pan says his company and 3 others have to work on a site of 50,000 square meters. The company has had to call on workers to give up their New Year break. Wu Zhizhen says he can only rest 5 hours a day. He says the sense of responsibility drives him working tirelessly, despite having heart problems.
作为一个武汉市的市民，也作为一个工程建设者，能够尽自己的一点微薄之力吧，这是我们应该做的，也是我自己应该做的。
The new hospital is being built and designed at the same time. In 6 days, the construction will be ready. Many workers say it will be a new miracle. 赵云飞 CCTV 武汉湖北 Province. Well, you can certainly call it a miracle back then because you won't imagine what it's like to build a hospital within 10 days. One of the toughest jobs for them is that given the fact that that was the first day of Lunar New Year, so many people are actually are at leave at home. And also, a lot of construction materials were not available. One, because it was the holiday, and 2, it's because the city was locked down. So when you do shipping, it's hard to make it happen. So, it's a lot of workers are very dedicated to make it happen, and they built actually 2 new hospitals. One is Huoxinshan and another one is Leishanshan. Well, later on, the government found out that, well, actually building hospitals might not be the most effective way to contain the virus because all of a sudden they got so many newly infected cases. So what happened later was that they kind of renovated the gyms as well as schools as well as public spaces, exhibition centers into temporary hospitals, and they put beds over there. And those are the places to have patients with mild symptoms because when all the patients got mild symptoms without any pre-existing conditions, there was not an issue of cross infections. So later on, the temporary hospitals all moved into the exhibition centers. But why Huoxinshan and Leishanshan so significant? It's just because that both of the construction sites got well built within so short period of time. It certainly gives the general public a signal of how dedicated the Chinese government was and how dedicated the governments put the people's lives as their priority and how much effort they should make to make sure the virus got contained. And that's one of the message that the government wants to send out. And also, the 2 newly built hospitals gave a lot of confidence to the local people, and that what makes them believe that they will endure the toughest time quite soon. Another dedication that the government was making is to send medical workers, including military medical workers. Military freight planes from People's Liberation Army have arrived here at Wuhan Tianhe International Airport. They are carrying some medical team and medical supplies to support the city. Soon they got transferred to the newly built Huoshenshan Hospital, which is ready to hand over to the army.
当我们接到命令的时候呢，第一时间都没有任何的考虑。国家在这个有危难的时候，在有疫情爆发的时候，作为军人，我们一定要冲在前面。
A front line which many of the team have seen before, having experiences during the 2003 SARS epidemic and the more recent Ebola outbreaks in Africa. Before their departure, the teams went through sophisticated training process. They say they're now ready for the challenge, despite knowing very little about what lies ahead.
这次任务的特殊性呢，第一个呢，我们有一些对于环境、地域的未知性在里边。第二个呢，我们的防护准备，我们准备了一定的。当然，如果我们不知道我们会对这个任务有多长时间，所以对于我们在这儿战斗的时间、战斗的方式，我们还有一些未知的程度。
Uncertainty that becomes even greater by having to work in a special hospital that sprung up in less than 2 weeks. 赵云飞 CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
Well, those footages also went quite viral on the internet, especially within China, because people would love to see the military medical team arrive, because when they see that there is when troops arrive, on the first hand, China technically declared that this is the wartime against the virus. It shows how serious the government is treating the virus. And on the other hand, it also gives a lot of the confidence to the Chinese people in terms of how the government is dedicated to contain the virus. So, and also, those are the medical workers who are going to later use the Huoshenshan Hospital, which is being built, already being constructed in the last 10 days. So I want to talk about some of my observations while working in the front line. I thought it's very important to talk to the core people and also access the most key information to the public. For example, when the government say that they're building a temporary hospital, and you have to be there, and film the footage. You have to be there and talk to people and see how the hospital is being built. Because certainly if you don't go there, you won't be able to understand what are the difficulties of making it all happen. And also the arrival scene of a military troop, especially by aircraft carrier. It's a very astonishing scene that is certainly great to view, and also feeling the atmosphere. When we talk to the soldiers, and we know that how they're ambitious in terms of combating the virus. Certainly, some people also know that a lot of people also know that this is a very dangerous virus. But how fearless they are, how dedicated they are, it's certainly, if you don't go there, if you don't go to the front line, you won't be able to experience. Now, also being able to get those information out is to help a strategy to help the entire world to understand what was really happening in Wuhan. Now, the toughest thing of reporting is how can we, gather all those kind of emotions? How can we gather all kind of feelings of people on the ground to the general public? Because if you're not there in Wuhan, you won't be able to feel the atmosphere. You won't be able to understand the real situation. So that's what journalism will do. First of all, you certainly will come from the person's perspective, giving more information about the person, telling the person's story, the people's story. Will be able to let the audience build more connection emotionally, and also, giving the more comprehensive picture about what was really happening in Wuhan. And those are the strategies or methods me as a journalist used in order to get more people understand what was really happening in Wuhan. And also, When we talk about this is a pandemic, this is an epidemic, certainly there are people could die from the dangerous virus. We got a very exclusive, I would say, or very limited chance to really talk to the family that has a deceased patient from COVID-19, unfortunately. But they would like to begin their new life without their loved mother or grandmother.
The day Liu Zechong's mother passed away from COVID-19 infection, her 8-year-old daughter drew a picture of grandma. Liu says she's not yet ready to explain what has happened.
她知道佳佳走了那一天，她还是哭了，就说没有佳佳了怎么样，然后也就那样，我就抱了她一下嘛。然后6号床嘛，标注得很明显。
Bed number 6 is where grandma was kept in the ICU before losing her battle with COVID-19. Liu says her daughter's picture relieved her, as she was not allowed to see her mother due to her deteriorating condition. Liu called the hospital every day and searched online for reports of her mom's ICU ward.
有时候还是觉得这不真实，毕竟真的就是你完全就从他走一直到现在，连骨灰盒都没有拿到，你没办法去嘛，不能安置他，所以总觉得不太真实，而且之前脑海里面他就是那种很鲜活的一个人。
Liu's mother was an active member in the community. Neighbors say she was well-liked and had great personality. Liu's husband is now taking on more responsibility with his mother-in-law gone.
其实我跟我岳母之间感情也特别好，跟自己亲妈没多大区别，根本就没有区别。我们岳母我们之间就是氛围都很好，我们经常都开玩笑。对于我们来说，又流失了一个亲人，打击还是很大的。
The couple says the epidemic has made them realize the importance of family, and the tragedy will keep them more united and strong. 赵云飞 CGTN 武汉湖北 Province.
Well, I got lots of feedback from this story. It was certainly not many reporters would really have the access to talk with the family with deceased family member from COVID-19. And it's also a very emotional story. A lot of people would say that they really got touched when they see the son-in-law cried in front of camera. And also a lot of people would say that how they're also being touched by how rational the daughter is, being able to facing the new life. I'm still having contact with this family, and this is a family that is really optimistic about what the tragedy that happened to the family. Also, I actually want to keep this something really positive. So in the end, I asked this family, I know that this is a tragedy to you guys, but what do you learn from the pandemic? A lot of people, both the mother and father would say that, okay, well, just to love people more. And this is certainly what they have learned from this epidemic. Well, we talk with the deceased, family member. They would say it's very, the soundbite saying that it's very unrealistic because when she heard that her mother died and won't be able to see her for the last chance, and that also gives you an idea of how hard and how severe the situation was back then in Wuhan, that it also can touch the audience and give an audience an understanding of what are the hardships that the family is going through. When we talk about the people who died, we certainly talk with people who survived from this deadly virus, and especially those people who are aged patients. So we get a chance to speak with some of the aged patients, and also a lot of them got emotional when they discharged from hospital.
Although the elderly are deemed to be the most vulnerable age group, through the persistent efforts of medical staff at this hospital in Wuhan, 66-year-old Auntie Tong was able to make a full recovery.
护士都照顾得我们很好，我表示很感谢，我很激动的，我眼泪都要流出来了。
Her son said he was very worried initially because his mother's condition was so severe, but praised the high-level support she received from all the staff here.
其实一个好医生不光是他的医术，还有医德，还有他在跟患者家属的沟通上，其实也是很重要的。因为最紧张的可能就是我们。
Wuhan No. 3 Hospital welcomed a support team from Shanghai a few days ago, many of whom had experiences from the 2003 SARS epidemic.
大家首先是一个信任，对吧？大家双方的信任。第二个，我们双方都有个共同目标，希望能够在短时间内打赢这场攻坚战。
他们的加盟给我们带来了知识和技术，以及呢，就是人力上的帮助。 使我们迅速地达成了共识，在治疗上达成了统一。那我们也形成了我们自己的治疗的，就是个体化的诊疗方法，以及呢我们在指南的指导下的一个共识。
More than 18,000 medical workers from all over China have brought not only their skills and expertise to Wuhan, but also their warmth and empathy.
A lot of patients say facing the disease, there's nothing to be afraid of, as long as they have the confidence to combat coronavirus. Discharged patients, some of them told me that it's the doctors and nurses that gave them a second life. So you can certainly tell those are very strong sound bites, and the sound bites that can really connect the audience. Well, there's also a different layer of information in that piece of reporting, which is people are very, very grateful for the people assisting medical staff from other parts of the country. For example, the aged woman was saved by a medical team actually from Shanghai who traveled reversely to the epicenter of the virus when Wuhan got shut down. And also tens of thousands of people came to Wuhan, medical workers, I mean, to support the pandemic control work in Wuhan. So I also tried to have that kind of layer of information to my reporting. But this is certainly the great piece of reporting that would give a confidence to the general audience and give some happiness to the general audience, especially for those people there in Wuhan, but also to the international audience, that to give them a idea that even the aged people, when they endure, very well looking after, they can also recover, even though this is a deadly virus. Now, the last two pieces of reporting are all about talking to the key people. One people lose the battle against the virus, another person win the battle against the virus. But certainly this is the epidemic. I would like to make a point that certainly the epidemic will affect people from all walks of life, would affect the society in many, many different perspectives. But the core people, out of core people, are those patients, are those medical workers, are those patients who survived from the virus, who got infected, who maybe are in asymptomatic cases, and also people who unfortunately died. And those are the group of members we should always remember, and those are the group of people we should always go to and talk with and do a story about them. But as I mentioned, this is a pandemic, this is the epidemic. It could affect many people, even though you don't get infected. So at the beginning point of the city's shutdown, everybody would have words to say. So I talked with many people. It's also because of the city's shutdown. When you get a chance, you have a topic when talk to people, and people became more friendly, speaking with each other. I certainly found it's easier to speak with strangers, to discuss about what was happening. because when people have no knowledge about the novel virus, speaking with each other or communicating with each other and making sure each other is fine is certainly something that make yourself feeling better. So I took advantage of this opportunity and talked with people and met from who are doing different jobs, which make it very, very convenient for me as a reporter to do stories about them. One of the long form stories that I featured is a volunteer story. This is a volunteer group that is really formed voluntarily, and they don't know each other before, but they united and help those medical workers and help people who actually in need to deliver those protective gear and also deliver those daily necessities.
哇，你就这么一点就这么多啊？
这个是医院的生活物资，一个就是酸奶，还有这个饮品。我们大家都把自己的心态调整好就行了。从大年30出来的初心就是在做这个事情，做志愿者。
啥样的车跟着去？
哎，你好，姚医生。哎，我是给您送那个酸奶的，大概1个半小时之内我们可以到，您那边方便接收吗？哎，好，我到了医院以后我跟您打电话好吗？哎，拜拜。好的，这边没问题。我们是志愿者，我们没有工资，我们加的每一滴油都是我们自费的。我很幸运，我们很幸运，这个团队大家都是愿意付出的人，这个非常重要。
健康码，健康码。
我的健康码。
你每次过这宽甲都要看健康码。
对对对，进出都要，进出都要。
层层关卡呀。
对，临门一脚还是要坚持，我们很支持也很理解，因为最后的关头，很多人已经都开始内心开始松懈了嘛。我觉得最后的关头应该更严一点。我们所有的转赠的医疗物品都是很清楚的。我们要给捐赠方，就是他是医院的工作人员嘛，就证明他取了这个物资，也是对捐赠方的负责任，也是对别人真心的感谢嘛。
他们这边属于是我们是民营医院嘛，然后就是一直还没有得到很多社会上的关注，但是这个医院呢也一直在接收着发热的这些门诊，然后这个患者。
一开始我们的物资是非常缺的，因为当时要作为武汉市，首先要确保这26家定点的这个发热医院，再加上当时这个整个物资啊，加上这个供应配送啊这些通道并不是非常的完善。但是后来很快逐步都有改观，包括我了解到的志愿者团队所做的一些事迹，他们在雨天、在雪天关爱街头的流浪者，他们关爱一些更为特殊的一些群体，这个城市的清洁工人，这个城市的环卫工人，他们也是在一线上确保整个大武汉运转的。但是作为我们志愿者车队能关注的这么细，应该从我们医者仁心这个角度来看，跟我们所做的工作，我认为性质是一样的，而且重量级也是非常一致的。我确实从这个我们在一起构筑这个防线的时候，我们觉得作为我们的志愿者同志在一线奔波，他们更加有需要从预防这个角度来做好自己的防护。
哇，还是热着呢！方太医院给我们熬的这个中药，这个非常好。在这个疫情发展到今天为止，我还一道没人吃过这个中药呢。回去了就给我们这个车队的所有的队友，我们就能分发下去了。
武汉第一，武汉加油！武汉加油！武汉加油！
今天就这个我代表黑龙江医疗队，然后为他们种下一棵这个希望的树在武汉。是这样，因为他们也不出来，今天出不来，他们还在忙着。哎， 把我的防护服我把它脱下来，然后给它直接裹上去。哇，那我们一会儿去往这个土里边种的时候，这个绳子用拿掉吗？可以掉。可以把它解掉是吧？解掉啊。用不用浇水什么的？要浇水呀，要浇水是吧？要浇水的，那一定要浇水。等会儿搞点水过来。搞定。
通过这个植树活动，来纪念延娥医生对武汉地区抗击疫情所做的贡献啊，这是非常有意义的一个活动啊！我相信，在5年、10年以后，这个我们这些今天植下的树木能够长成这个参天大树。
在这场没有硝烟的战争当中，我认为只要是在武汉能行走在路上的人，都是勇士。我们肯定是一直要坚持到最后，陪着这些医护工作者，疫情不退，我们不退。
This is a non-narrative feature story. This is also one of the stories that I got most feedback because if you put the narration down and only keep the net sounds and keep the original sound on tape, it certainly it's more powerful. It gives more impact to the general audience because it's very authentic. And also, we featured this volunteer group for really a couple of days, and we were so touched and amazed by the effort they've made to this city because they did all of that without any rewards or without any, praises by people. So certainly this is a very great job they are doing. And, it's also not very long. It's 5 to 6 minutes. So it's very good for social media spreading. And also, as I mentioned, it's very authentic. So it quickly went very viral on the internet. Now, those are the feature stories. Just last couple of stories I showed you are all the feature stories that I have produced there in Wuhan. Back then, when the city was under lockdown, any piece of reporting could be a kind of breaking news. When we talk about breaking news, you can, offer multiple layers of facts. You can offer, balanced ideas. You can offer, people's opinions or other people who are challenging those opinions. But at the same time, I'm trying to stand on a position where I would like to, focus on 1 and 2 persons within the stories and really tell the audience what he or she would think in terms of the ongoing pandemic. So that's the importance of the feature news, and that's easier for the general audience to make understanding of individuals. Why we focus on people? Because when the city got locked down, as I mentioned, everyone got infected. The city is conducting a very, very strict lockdown measures. It means a lot to the people in Wuhan. And for the general audience, especially the international audience who are afar from the city, they probably wouldn't be able to understand what was really, really happening. For example, when the city is taking very strict measures, quarantine measures, it's hard to leave their community. It's hard to get their daily necessities. It's hard to communicate with, it's hard to meet with your friends and family. You probably have to get separated with your loved ones. So it's a very, very tough time for the people. Also, given the fact that back then, many other parts of the world was not affected by the coronavirus. So some of the international community would really criticize Wuhan that, okay, maybe they're taking a very severe, they're doing too much. But actually, what we are talking about is all about sacrifices. It's a city of 11 million people who every single people made sacrifices in order to contain the virus in the 76 days in that period of time. And now China is relatively safe in compare with other parts of the world. And without the 76 days of lockdown in Wuhan, it really won't happen. So also, I not necessarily wants to tell the human story in my package stories. I also wanted to tell the human stories while I'm doing the live shots, because human stories or personal stories is easy to make people to understand what was really happening. While I was doing a live shot for the BBC, I also mentioned about my experience, speaking with family members of the patients. And also, because the city was under lockdown, many international media organizations wouldn't be able to send their reporters to the epicenter of the virus outbreak. So I also took the responsibility to report to many international media outlets. Here's a piece that I did for BBC.
Well, let's get you more on the coronavirus outbreak now. We've been talking about Wuhan, the city at the center, the epicenter of the outbreak. I think we can now speak live to Zhao Yunfei, a correspondent with the state-run Chinese TV channel CGTN. He is at the city's exhibition center, which has now been turned into a temporary hospital. Thank you for joining us on BBC World News. Tell us what you're seeing. Tell us what facilities you've actually seen.
We're quite clear the exhibition center. I'll get to that later. We're outside the Wuhan Union Hospital. Now, this is the hospital that has just claimed last week that they're extremely in shortage of medical resources, including protection gear, masks, as well as protection suits. So just behind me is the fever clinic. We can see there are people wearing protection gear, providing all sorts of help available. So it looks like their situation is getting a little better. From the position where I'm looking at, the fever clinic is still quite busy. Now, this hospital is completely full. So once they get through the clinic, if they got mild symptom, they will be transferred to the exhibition center, which you have just mentioned. This center is exhibition hall is just got renovated to a hospital within 24 hours, and it is just about 100 meters away from here. Now, because this is newly got renovated exhibition center, so it doesn't have very fully equipped medical resources and equipment. So there is a concern over whether there will be a cross-infection incident. Well, the experts say that all of those patients sent to the exhibition center will all have similar symptoms. They're all diagnosed with the infection, but they all have mild symptoms, and they don't have any pre-existing healthy conditions. So there won't be any issue with the cross-infection.
Zhao Yunfei, would you just tell us, do you think patients trust the authorities on this?
Well, we do talk with patients' relatives a couple of days ago, and they do have a little issue with finding beds because the resources are very, very tight so far. The outbreak is all sudden, so many patients, they do have to find several ways to finally find a bed at the hospitals and settle down. But as the exhibition hall center I just mentioned, basically, they have cleared 13 similar spaces like that, and we're talking about 10,000 beds. The situation will get better, and more patients will get cured.
Zhao Yunfei, thank you very much for joining us live from Wuhan, telling us something about the medical facilities.
Well, we get hundreds of media inquiries there in Wuhan, and then within the 120 days that I was reporting in Wuhan, I did roughly 30 live shots for media organizations that is not CGTN, so worldwide. I did reporting for media organization basically for African countries as well as Americans, as well as basically many parts of the world. Now, it's simply because, while the city was under lockdown, nobody would actually being able to travel to that place. I arrived in the city of Wuhan before the city got shut down, so I will be able to stay and bring live stream or a live shot report for TV organizations from around the world. Some people invited me to do a live shot for them. Other people invited me to join their discussion programs to be as a guest. Now, one of my observations serving international media outlets is that I see that there is a gap of recognition about what was really happening there in Wuhan, because a lot of the questions that I got from the anchors are about the transparency of the Chinese government, as well as the death toll, as well as how severe or dangerous the situation is, or very rough question about what is it like on the street and what are the daily routines of local people over there. But a lot of my reporting has been going really deep and further in terms of asymptomatic cases, in terms of the renovation of temporary hospital, in terms of quarantine measures, in terms of all-scale door-to-door screening, temperature check, and nucleic acid test, all sorts of that. So certainly I can give more information to the international audience than they demand. But another interesting observation is that as the virus become more worldwide, as it become a pandemic, as more and more countries also get affected by the coronavirus, their questions from the international media organization becomes more specific, becomes more, targeted. So as you can tell, as more and more when you are in the middle of the situation, you become care about what is happening. And also because of Wuhan experienced all of that at first. So Wuhan will be able to give a very successful model to the international community in terms of containing the virus. And also being able to stand in front of the camera and offer the detailed information or more specific information to the to the international audience through different platforms. It also shows, the transparency of the information, how the information got flowed. So it was a very interesting experience, because when I never report for foreign media organizations, and it's just because of this very severe situation that I get a chance to work for so many of our colleagues from around the world, and I treat that a very important experience, and I also treat that as something that is worth sharing with our colleagues from around the world. Also, not just the international community, the foreigners in Wuhan also closely watching CGTN. Actually, CGTN is the only television network that has got broadcasted in English in China. So CGTN is basically the only source for a lot of the foreigners in Wuhan. They get a chance to understanding what is really happening outside. And a lot of people, when I did several stories about foreigners in Wuhan, and many people say that they see me on TV every day, and the presence of myself is actually a signal saying that this city is still safe, and they trust the information being delivered by CGTN. Here's a story about a racehorse trainer.
Rui Severino is a trainer taking care of 27 race horses in Wuhan. Though the coronavirus outbreak has alarmed him, he's remaining in the city.
Now we have to be even more vigilant.
Be more vigilant and pay close attention to both the horses and people. Despite scheduled competitions being postponed, Rui doesn't want to leave his animal friends.
How can I make friends with her?
Well, you can just let her slightly smell you, and she will smell you.
Okay.
And then she feels that you're not a threat. And then you can start slowly petting her like that and just talk to her nicely.
How do you say I love you?
Just say I love you in a nice tone.
Okay, I love you. What about in a very harsh tone? I love you.
Then she will know that you probably pose a threat.
Horses are animals.
Horses are animals.
Are you worried due to the current epidemic?
They are athletes. They are always in strict programs like training programs. So they have a pretty strong immune system.
Checking the animals' temperatures regularly is a necessity.
She's okay. She's 37.6.
So she's fine.
37.6, a little bit higher than a human's body temperature, but it's just perfect for a horse. For Rui himself, an Australian and Portuguese dual citizen, the embassies of both countries have told him to leave, but he refuses to do so.
I watch your reports and I watch all your colleagues' reports. Every time I'm at home, I watch CGTN, and that's my source of information. I find it very reliable, and I have the trust in China. I trust China, trust that China can overcome these, and so I have to stay.
Wuhan relies on horse racing events to attract international visitors, but the epidemic has affected the industry. Rui says the riders and horses have already put much trust in him, so he cannot leave them behind. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
Rui Severino told me that he watches me on TV every day, and then every day a noon show, it's our 12 p.m. show, it's called Global Watch, and when he sees me doing live shots from Wuhan, he got information, all the information from me as well as my colleagues, other frontline reporters, is also that piece of the fact that him telling me that makes me so strong in terms of like working in Wuhan for so long period of time. He's actually really encouraged me as a reporter. It's certainly something that is rewarding as a journalist. Now, there's also a side story to this story. As also mentioned in the tag out, Wuhan is also known for racehorse industry, and it's one of the few cities in China that really has the racehorse industry. And the pandemic certainly is also a big hit to that industry. So in order to keep the horses healthy, as well as keep those trainers healthy, is also one of their priorities. And that's also why they keep themselves vigilant. So those are the people who are still at work during the epidemic. And certainly I also talked with a foreigner who quarantined himself at home. And let's check out what his life looks like.
Huh.
Hi there.
Hey, how you doing?
Yunfei. How are you?
Come on in if you feel comfortable.
Thank you. So I brought you something.
Oh, cool. Supplies.
Supplies. I know. I know you need this so much. Coffee.
Yes.
That's part of a
I'm running low.
Our visit to Professor McClure's home was a welcoming change for the Wuhan University scholar.
It's been 5 weeks I've been here. You're the first human beings I've actually seen within this distance in 5 weeks.
To contain the coronavirus brought by human interactions, Wuhan has shut down virtually all communities, while allowing only one member from each apartment to leave the house once every few days. But this segregation, McClure says, hasn't necessarily isolated people.
The thing about China is we're a thick network of interhuman relationships. I mean, you can look at the city, it just looks like a bunch of gray boxes made out of concrete. But what's really going on is the personal ties between people.
McClure says many like him in isolation have their daily lives disrupted.
We're making an incredible sacrifice in Wuhan. The volunteers are risking themselves to maintain connections between the people in our community.
Community volunteers have been working tirelessly to meet the needs of residents.
I am the volunteer who sends you a message every day.
Yes, nice to meet you.
They are the only human interaction that McClure has during the month-long epidemic.
I'm having problems with my internet connectivity.
Is it because of that bill?
No, I paid the bill.
McClure's wife lives in another Chinese city, while the rest of his family members are in the United States. He makes it a point to call and keep in touch with them every day, making special efforts to remain connected in highly unusual and extraordinary times. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
Well, let me tell you why we want to interview foreigners there in Wuhan. The most important reason is that we are an international channel. Now, our audience are international audience. We certainly would not just only want to include stories of Chinese people in Wuhan, but also people from around the world, what their life looks like under the strict quarantine measures. You can see there's a clip with volunteers communicate with Professor McClure, with a translator, and it certainly takes a moment for them to communicate, but it looks like they are having a good time. They're well preparing for this kind of communication, and they're doing well. And also by having the international citizens comment on their experience in Wuhan, it actually gives the international audience a better understanding about what was really happening in Wuhan. Because back then, when Wuhan was under lockdown, some media or outlets would criticize that the government violates human rights. So I certainly asked the human rights question to Steve McClure and asked, he would say that certainly people would have different understanding of human rights, and his understanding about how the government preserving people's human rights is to make sure that they're healthy, to make sure that children got access to their education, to make sure the daily normal routines, and that's part of human rights. And also China, he says Chinese people would have their own saying of their own human rights. And that's basically a really great counter-argument towards the criticism over the human rights issues when the Chinese government conducting the quarantine measures. Well, in fact, later on, many other countries follow the suit, conduct lockdown measures to city. Some of the countries conduct city lockdown. Some of the countries even conduct country lockdown to ensure the virus got contained. So it proved that, as long as you got affected by what's going on, you would better understand. You will better understand the situation who is in the middle of a tragedy or in the middle of spiral. But certainly, if you didn't experience what's going on, journalism is a great method. By telling the stories to the international audience, it gives people a better understanding about the situation there in Wuhan. Now, let me go to the next phase. After the quarantine, the city is conducting its recovery in terms of economic recovery, and as well as from many different perspectives. So at the later stage, in the April or March, the city has already discussed the matter of how to recover its daily routine after a long-term period of time of quarantine. So I went to a factory, which is actually its first couple of days of operation.
It's Peng Kun's first day back to work after a 2-month-long leave he never expected. Although the pandemic has affected his life, Peng says he's lucky that he didn't lose his job.
When I came back and saw my colleagues, I knew that everything was back to normal. I feel so relieved.
Peng works at one of 3 assembly lines owned by Dongfeng Honda Automobile in Wuhan. Now all of the company's production factories are back up and running. Some workers still couldn't make their way back, but the company could not wait any longer.
The operation suspension has affected our work with suppliers and dealers. The loss from production can affect both the company and staff. Our clients want to get our cars as soon as possible, so we are in a rush to fulfill orders.
Li says virus containment is still paramount while at work. As the operation gradually resumes, Li says he's confident to see a positive response from the market. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
So this is a good example of recovery in terms of back at work, but certainly they're not just all good stories. The economic recovery is certainly a very tough job for local small and medium enterprises. The car factory workshop are bigger enterprises, but what about small and medium enterprises? In order to bring a balanced reporting, I visit a small enterprises, which is a restaurant chain, and check out how they're doing.
Escalator down.
今天搞体育锻炼。
Stores closed. This Wuhan shopping center's emptiness is an effect of months of suspension due to the COVID-19 pandemic. Though Wuhan is unlocked, customer traffic in stores is not what it used to be.
人挤人，人群爆满。
Food chain owner Jian Hongbo has a demo store in the mall. Now he has to keep it closed.
开始只是一个危机。
In the beginning, we thought this was just a crisis. Then we realized it was a life and death issue. We have never experienced a pandemic like this. We were not prepared, and we were so naive.
This mall at Optics Valley used to be a hot hangout for nearby college students who are still not back in school. Jian says there's no way his store can afford to reopen. But he introduces us to another merchant who has bravely decided to resume food service. It's Wang Hao's first day back at work, and he has only seen a few customers.
As long as people don't take off their masks, they can't get rid of their fear of the virus.
For Huang and Jian, they say the hardest part is not earning money, but that the public hasn't gotten back into the habit of eating out. Back at the office, this work zone has been empty for 3 months. Food chains heavily rely on logistics, so the central Chinese city of Wuhan is ideal. But due to the current economic situation, they are about to move their headquarters to another city, Zhengzhou. It's a tough decision, one that means they'll have to cut almost half their staff of 70.
We are very reluctant to do so. All of our business plans have been ruined. We may not reach our goals for the year.
Jian says he hopes the unexpected turbulence will make them strong. He says they will find chances to return to Wuhan when the market picks up. And he says it is just a matter of time. Zhao Yunfei, CGTN, Wuhan, Hubei Province.
Certainly, it's very tough for small and medium enterprises. The reason why I did this story is because I just wanted the audience to know that this is not an easy decision. I mean, the shutdown of the city is certainly not an easy decision. As I mentioned in the story, that people still don't have the habit of eating out. It's a very slow recovery process. But later on, as we know that China's economic recovery is speeded up later in the year. But when the city just got opened up, after 76 days of lockdown, it was a really tough period of time for the local enterprises, but not just only for the enterprises. I would say that this might have been a really tough time for many local people as well. We also talk with mental hotline counselors, and they told us that they received many calls from people, and people really endure frustration and anxiety due to the loss of their jobs, is due to their being apart for too long time with their loved ones and family members. So the city lockdown certainly impact every single person. So people certainly made so many sacrifices in order to help contain the virus, in order to not infect other parts of China, as well as not bring threat to other parts of the world. And this is really a city of heroism. So the two pieces of reporting that I just show you, it's a demonstration of balanced reporting, both showing the good side as well as the bad side, and also giving a detailed angle from the story is certainly, as I mentioned, boost the understanding, especially given the framework for international audience when they have when they don't have too much knowledge about what's going on in Wuhan, just to help them understand the situation of ordinary people there in Wuhan. It also boosts the transparency of the pandemic, of the epidemic situation, just to give people an idea what the streets look like in Wuhan under shutdown. What about the communities? What about the factories and workshops? What about in the hospitals and railway stations? So during the 76th of lockdown, I certainly traveled to as many places as I could to give a comprehensive picture of what the city looks like in Wuhan. I also did a recap story about the shutdown period of Wuhan in the 76 days of lockdown.
A war without gunfire. The enemy, COVID-19. To contain the virus, Wuhan, the metropolis in central China, grinded to a halt. On January 23rd, its metro stations were shut down, inner city public transport suspended, and highways closed. It came a day ahead of the Chinese Lunar New Year, dashing hopes of family reunions.
能够了解到，作为一个在外面拼搏了1年的人，每个人都希望盼望着跟家人合家团聚，但是遇到武汉这种事情，那真的是没办法。
Despite the initial shortage of medical workers and supplies, doctors and nurses risked their lives by doing whatever they could in the frontline battle against the coronavirus.
熟手太少了，就经验丰富的一线大夫少了。大部分支援的大夫他还不是完完全全的这个 ICU 的大夫，所以培训呐、训练呐，他还需要一个过程。
Doctors and nurses fought courageously. They're fearless, inspiring, and instilling confidence in their patients.
我是从死亡线上过来的人，这都全部交到医生了。现在的心情特别的激动，能出院了，我觉得哎呀，太重生了。
But some didn't win the battle. Families that bore the loss of loved ones continue to grieve.
有时候还是觉得这不真实，毕竟真的就是你完全就从他走一直到现在，连骨灰盒都没有拿到，脑海里面他就是那种很鲜活的一个人。
As people choose to stay home to reduce the spread of the epidemic, mental health counselors stood by to help those suffering from stress and anxiety.
在这个艰难的时刻啊，我想不只是爸爸您，还有孩子的妈妈，还有孩子自己，都在承受，甚至包括着我们每一个人。 都在承受着这样一个面临一个巨大的这种考验的时候，可能内心中都在受煎熬。
And everyone helped out in any way they could to support the virus prevention and control efforts during the epidemic.
We're making an incredible sacrifice in Wuhan. You can look at the city, it just looks like a bunch of gray boxes made out of concrete. But what's really going on is the personal ties between people.
On March 28th, after more than 60 days of lockdown, Wuhan railway stations welcomed its first batch of passengers. Migrant workers returned to work, while factories and business gradually resumed operations.
回来上班之后就看到大家就感觉，像往常一样了，然后也没有什么过多的顾虑了。
As the COVID-19 threat receded, the city gradually lifted its quarantine measures. And residents are finally able to breathe a sigh of relief.
More than 2 months has passed, and Wuhan is slowly returning to being the vibrant metropolis that it used to be. Some people say this is a city of heroes, where its people did not flinch from challenges and fought them head on. It's also a city of everyone pulling together and overcoming one of its most difficult and even darkest moments. 赵云飞 CCTV 武汉湖北 Province. Well, even myself, it's very emotional for me to look back all of those pictures. Those are the people that I spoke with and the stories I did during that period of very special moment, the very special period of time of the city lockdown in Wuhan. It was the early stage of the pandemic when people have zero understanding of about the virus, including myself. So. My colleague and I are threatened our lives to, go to the epicenter of the outbreaks, and we tried our best to talk as many people, be as many places as we could to give the holistic picture of what the city really looks like there in Wuhan. This is definitely a very hard-earned opportunity for me and my colleagues as reporters, and this is certainly a lifelong thing that we would certainly want to go back and reflect what we did well and what we did not well, and reflect on it, and in order to do better in the future. Well, that's about it for my presentation. If you have any comments as well as any questions or thoughts, please don't hesitate to contact me using the information on the PowerPoint. Both email me as well as contact me on Facebook or Twitter. Also, if you want to send any interview inquiries, those are the information that you can also reach out to. But certainly, this is a very big privilege for me to tell you what really happened in Wuhan, as well as my reporting experience in Wuhan. And I hope that you learned something, and I hope that you got something to take away. And also, please contact me and give me some of your thoughts. Well, thank you for watching. Stay safe.